Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are venturing deep down into the city sewers, where there have been reports of some nasty big rats. But in order to achieve this result, we must first cut all of our foam to scale, and to do this, I have ventured outside to use our trusty foam cutter and embrace the sunlight and accept the ventilation of the wind. After building up 2 layers of foam, I know I wanted to create a brick wall with a dried up sewer bed next to it. And in order to make this brick wall, I bought some of these brick rollers from Green Stuff World. And while I may have not figured the best method to get straight clay, I managed to level out on top of the diorama, and then after realizing I didn't have enough pressure on the first roll, I rolled again. With the wall now built, or rather rolled, it's time to add some imperfections to those stone bricks, and to do this I'm using the edge of my hobby knife and gently adding cracks and holes into that clay. And just like the brick wall, it needs some pavements, so I rolled out some more clay, and as soon as I was about to move it all broke in half. So let's go back to that first method. Unfortunately, this did mess up some of the wall we just did, but I'll come back to that later and hand sketch each of those bricks. And while we wait for a day for our clay to dry, let's head over and meet the hero of Kravon Hill. He was sent to exterminate the rat scourge underneath the city's sewers, but let's first prime him in black and then white from above. For our first colour, we are using medium blue by Vallejo for his cape while thinning it down a lot. In total, this took me 3 thin coats, which I then dry brush some burring blue all over the cape, and as the colours were a little bit too strong for my liking, I added another layer of medium blue over the top for some less contrast. Next it's time for the armour, and for this we're using the good old black metal, my favourite metallic, all over the armour. And when always painting this way, we need to try and make sure not to get any of the other colours onto the white spaces. And for his loincloth or skirt, we'll be using Black Lotus, painting in 2 coats, making sure the paint doesn't pool up too much. Now it's time to paint all of the secondary armour pieces with decayed metal for that nice aged brutalist look. This is for all of the iconography and tops of all the armour panels. Of course, who can forget all of that leather? For this we'll be using a reasonably diluted Rhinox hide that will do all of the work for us. For his left shoulder pauldron, we are mixing some paints into a darker blue to stick true to Games Workshop's colour scheme. And while we're here, we might as well touch up some of the mistakes we've made along the way with some white. Now let's quickly base coat all of his under armour in black, as we get ready to redo his hilt of his hammer in red instead of Sigvald Burgundy, which I tried it in. It's hammer time, which means we are using a heavily diluted dark grey to an almost wash consistency, and I do this in 2 layers and paint the hammer with it and also some of the stones while I'm at it. For his face I used Cadian flesh tone as I wanted a more tanned look, and it doesn't really matter if we get this on the beard, as that will be a nice dark colour later on. And I quickly painted the dirt in the same brown as earlier. And just like his dark hair, I'm using the same dark grey as before for some more coverage. And it's all coming together now as we can add some golden highlights to all of that decayed metal as we stipple some gold on. Here's a quick fire recipe by adding some yellow onto some white, then orange around all of the yellow edges while it's still all wet. To add some highlights to the skin, I added some of the lighter skin tone to the original mix, then highlighted his nose and cheeks because I can't really paint faces. For his beard and hair, I added some lighter greys and added tiny brushstrokes to make it look more like hair. Now, if you like a clean look for your model, here you go. But let's see what he would look like with some enamels. I started by covering everything but his cape in a black enamel and a brown enamel for the bottom. And once we get rid of all the enamels with some mineral spirits, here he is. And let's look what he would look like with his cape done as well. With the hero of Skaven Hill now completed, and the clay now dry, let's get back to this diorama. I wanted this diorama to look like a battle in a dingy, dirty sewer, so to start I chopped up Ratman and glued him down to the pavement.
I then chopped up his friend to stick under some nice mud-like clay. As for the pavement, it didn't really fully go on, as there were smooth areas not fully covered, so I grabbed some smart mud and plopped it right on top. This is our plan to start building up layers onto the diorama, as next it's time to grab some PVA glue and stick it everywhere, as we are going to sprinkle some foam and fake leaves all over the diorama, just to make it look like nature is starting to take it back. And once all that was dry, I then headed outside and primed the whole diorama, first with a black spray paint, then a final white spray paint, making this a zenithal highlight, meaning we've sprayed white from the top, so we can see all of that nice juicy detail. Now let's paint that clay to look like stone. For this we are using petroleum grey, a lovely dark grey by scale 75, but any dark grey will do for this. And to get this effect we're adding a lot of water to the paint mix to make it almost like a wash. Occasionally I might add some straight paint right onto those rocks, and then get my brush full of water and slap it on. And overall, I think this looks really good, so much so I did the same to all the pavement. So to make the stone a little bit brighter, I grabbed a lighter grey and started dry brushing it so that will give it nice edge highlights all over those rocks. This will make the piece stand out a bit more against the normal dark grey. And for all of this lovely dirt, I grabbed some Rhinoxide and watered it down once again into a wash, and painted over all of that dirt. In some areas I had to do this twice, or maybe thrice, as the smart mud is really absorbent and it does not like to accept paints into its life. While some of the paint was still wet, I grabbed some dirty yellow-like mud, and still in a wash-like consistency, I slightly wet blended it onto all of the tops of the dirt piles. And with the same paint even more watered down, I added this all over the rock wall in drips to make a nice colour variation to start weathering this rock wall. I also added some dark blues into the mix for a nice cold and warm mixture. Now back to the mud, I added a final highlight of orange to all of the muddy dirt piles. And while I was at it, I might as well add some of this to the wall. I think it creates this nice kind of rusty look to the stone. Even though it doesn't rust, you know what I mean. And looking at the diorama, it looked really messy, so I thought let's de-mess it by adding some messy enamels. For this I chose a black enamel wash and added it all over the rock wall, creating some nice shadows and contrast. I then removed all of the wash by using a non-fibrous towel dabbed with a mineral spirit, and it removed all of the wash, nicely leaving it just behind in the recesses. Next, I did the exact same process, but this time using a dark brown wash all over the dirt. With the enamels now dry, I wanted to add some mossy-like patterns all over the rock wall, as I wanted it to seem like the ceiling had been dripping and trickling down water for a long time. So for this, I used moss by Dirty Down. I also added this all over the bottom of the sewer, where all the water would occasionally run through. While that now dries, let's paint a rat. To start, I painted his shield in a watered down Rhinoxide. I then got a nice yellow contrast paint, because the story of this rat's life is that for his whole life he wanted to make his rat friendship group laugh. And while he was on a mission, he and his friends spied on a human dancing and frolicking in front of what the humans called a king. And everyone seemed to love and laugh at whatever that man did. So Ratsy took his clothes and wore it for himself. And from that day, this group of rat jesters would spread vile jokes and horror amongst the people of Kravon Hill. So for Ratsy's cloak, I used Sigvald Burgundy as well as Night Quester's flesh for all of his skin, slowly highlighting up by adding some basic skin tone into the mix. And for all of the fur, I used the same grey as the stones. After painting his chompers in basic skin tone, I added highlights to the cloak with a light purple and added a wash of snakebite leather all over that yellow cloak. Now I might have just left him like this, as I actually quite like this paint scheme, but since I've used enamels on all of the other miniatures and diorama, I thought I might as well give it a try. And once I removed the wash, I painted 3 more rats in different jester-like colour schemes, and moved back to the diorama to finish the rats there. Then once everything was glued down, it was done. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And as always, I've been Reese. Like and sub if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!